The blast occurred while I was cleaning my teeth, shaking the entire area, vibrating my glass panes, toppling my dental hygiene stand, and triggering my canning companion into a frenzied chorus as if doomsday had arrived next door. This wasn't a minor bang. The house-trembling explosion was followed by the distinct noise of electrical power surging through interior walls and heaven knows what other materials. After spitting into the basin, I calmly strolled to my front deck and observed gray clouds billowing from Karen's roof ventilation systems. I remained composed, no running, no alarm, not even a flinch. I simply enjoyed my morning beverage and murmured, "Well, she's finally experiencing consequences." To comprehend our arrival at this moment, you'd need to go back approximately 3 months, when I discovered my solar installation's efficiency mysteriously dropped 18% despite ideal conditions, spotless equipment, and no increased consumption. I'm not your typical backyard hobbyist. Before my early retirement, I operated a renewable energy company, meaning I watch my equipment like a caffeinated predator. Every electrical unit gets recorded. Every power variation gets noted. When my installation displayed unexplainable losses, I skipped technical support and launched a complete investigative analysis. Someone had accessed the buried electrical pathway connecting my equipment shed to the power conversion point. This wasn't done with simple tools or testing equipment. The perpetrator had cut through the cable with expert accuracy, installed a concealed branch connection, and redirected electricity as though constructing an emergency power network. The work was elegant, effective, audacious, and completely against the law. Using a directional current meter, I traced the diagnostic path and pinpointed the electrical drain to the eastern property boundary, precisely where Karen's land met mine. Karen represented a vocal whirlwind of flowery clothing and indirect aggressive communication. Self-designated homeowner association deputy leader, advocate for lawn compliance, enforcer of postal box standards, and apparently now an electricity thief. Rather than confronting her immediately, I pretended ignorance. I set up a fresh surveillance system camouflaged as irrigation hardware and began recording her consumption. Initially, her usage remained modest enough for illumination in several devices, but avarice follows predictable patterns. During subsequent weeks, her electrical draw increased dramatically. A complete new cooling system activated, followed by a spa, then her arrogant spouse. Let's name him Rick since that's obviously his identity. Added a Tesla charging station. They were draining electricity as if it cost nothing because for them, it didn't. That's when I initiated stage 1. I redirected a secondary power buffer through an adjustable electrical converter, essentially giving me control over the outgoing power on the stolen connection without affecting my personal system. I configured it to vary just enough to cause her devices to malfunction. Illumination wavered. The spa stopped mid-cycle. Her entrance barrier wouldn't activate. Small disruptions sufficient to prompt an electrician's visit. Through field glasses, I observed the technician scratching his head and mumbling about power grid instability. Karen blamed the community association's new shared solar initiative, which was fictional. She initiated a petition to have the imaginary system regrounded. Rick published warnings in the community application about electromagnetic disruption from orbital satellites. By this time, I had progressed to stage 2, creating a power consumption profile. I maintained records of every appliance they operated, timing power levels, electrical signatures, and consumption rates. Why? Because vengeance is most satisfying when you understand exactly what you're demolishing. Then the final provocation arrived. One morning, I discovered a notice taped to my storage building door with adhesive tape. Not mailed, not placed in the mailbox, but taped. The homeowner association had penalized me $600 for unauthorized electrical installations visible from public areas. The building housing my solar equipment had been reported by an unnamed resident for being unattractive and disruptive to community visual standards. I made one assumption: Karen, who else would weaponize regulations while simultaneously robbing me? She was unaware of my surveillance equipment. Or perhaps she knew and assumed I lacked the courage to fight back or the intelligence to expose her. She gravely underestimated my patience for perfect retribution. I didn't want to see her fined or pursue legal action. I wanted her to witness the gradual, terrifying collapse of her entitlement kingdom, with every destroyed wire whispering my identity. The following week, I started raising the power output on the stolen connection in barely noticeable steps, 10 volts, then 15, then 25, just enough to make her electronics begin humming more loudly. Motors overheated, circuit boards warped. Rick replaced their refrigerator compressor. Karen blamed the power company for over-energizing her automated home systems. She lodged a formal grievance. They dispatched a repair specialist who found no problems. She was furious, claimed sabotage, demanded access to local transformer records. Meanwhile, I set up a sound generator mimicking electromagnetic bursts, creating strange vibrations through her walls whenever she started the jacuzzi. The community application exploded with theories: extraterrestrials, government experiments, someone blamed cellular towers. Karen organized a public meeting which I attended with snacks, wearing a shirt reading, "Got Power." She missed the humor. Rick understood. He glared at me like he detected something rotten in the atmosphere. But suspicion wasn't evidence, and by then it was too late anyway. I adjusted the connection one final time, added a phase reversal filter, and let it operate for 3 days. On day 3, Rick installed an expensive surge protection device in their garage, designed to block power spikes. Instead, it amplified them. That morning brought the first explosion. Their home computer server, completely destroyed, blue smoke and charred wallboard. I stood peacefully on my deck watching the mayhem unfold. Emergency vehicles arrived. Karen screamed about sabotage. Rick blamed the association. Someone mentioned defective solar integration, and I simply smiled, enjoying my coffee with my perfectly functioning solar system humming behind me. Because you don't steal from the person who created the instruction manual, You especially don't penalize him for protecting what you stole. And you never corner a composed person because when he finally retaliates, your entire residence burns down. Karen's reign was cracking now. Her electricity was literally melting. And I was just beginning. The day following the explosion, the homeowner association distributed an emergency email that was both amusing and telling. The subject read, Community Alert Spontaneous Combustion Concerns. They included vague warnings about unregulated solar installations, reminders against tampering with underground utilities, and a message from Karen warning that those responsible for dangerous energy practices would face prosecution under association bylaws. The language made it clear she was attempting to portray herself as the victim of some mysterious electrical conspiracy, which was ironic, considering the only conspiracy involved her illegal connection to my system. She didn't realize it yet, but the web she'd woven around herself was starting to unravel. Her efforts to maintain control were becoming more frantic and sloppy. She even went door-to-door collecting signatures for a new regulation requiring every solar system to be pre-approved by a certified association energy consultant. Naturally, she claimed this qualification. I watched from my porch as she made her rounds in a bright green jacket and platform shoes, distributing forms like campaign season. When she reached my property, she didn't step onto the grass. Standing at the street edge, she shouted, "You'll need to submit your application by next week or the association will pursue legal escalation." I leaned against my front door frame, arms crossed. You realize this neighborhood was built outside the association's original authority, right? My property's exempt from that nonsense. Oh, she hesitated momentarily. It's under review. No, Karen, you're under review. Then I shut the door. From there, things deteriorated for her and became infinitely more entertaining for me. The explosion had destroyed their internal electrical system beyond repair. Every major appliance required replacement. 2 electricians abandoned the job after discovering mysterious connections and reroutes in the main electrical box that made no sense for a residential property. Rick attempted to claim he'd installed an independent hybrid system, but his story collapsed when the city inspector requested permits. None existed because the system was fictional. What they had was a parasitic connection, cleverly concealed under their landscaping and tapped into my underground conduit like a leech. That inspection report, filed as public record, provided the opening I needed. I contacted my old colleague Amir, now working at the county utilities office. Amir owed me a favor from when I helped design a solar array for his parents' farm free of charge. I sent him the report photographs and a package of data logs proving without question the exact timestamps of unauthorized power theft. He called back within an hour. You know this is technically a felony, right? Technically yes, I said, but I'm not filing criminal charges yet. I just want it flagged for code violations. He whistled. This is industrial grade theft, you're being generous. I'm playing the long game. He chuckled. All right, I'll forward this to compliance. You'll like the inspector I assign. Guy's a stickler for detail. That's how Ernest Dugan entered the scene. Dugan was a thin man in his 60s with thick glasses and the soul of a tax auditor, the type who arrived with printed binders, a measuring wheel, and enough markers to flag a golf course. He appeared at Karen's house on a Thursday morning wearing a reflective vest and a grimace suggesting he'd rather be at the dentist. I observed from my shed as he surveyed the property, stopping every few feet to take notes. After an hour, he rang my doorbell and introduced himself. "Mr. Lawson, you're the one who submitted the data." I nodded and handed him a USB drive containing the complete logs. "Everything's timestamped. You'll find usage spikes at every instance where my output dropped." He plugged it into a rugged tablet and reviewed the files, his eyebrows rising higher and higher. "I'm guessing this is just a storage shed, correct?" he asked, pointing toward my solar outbuilding. "Correct," I said. "Legal, permitted, and 20 feet inside my property line." He nodded. "Good, 'cause what they did," he said, jerking a thumb toward Karen's house, "is highly illegal. I'm issuing a stop order on any further construction or electrical work until this is resolved." That same afternoon, Karen stormed onto my lawn. "You called the county?" she shrieked. "No," I said, "the county called me." "You're harassing me, you're stalking our energy use." "Actually," I said, "you've been using my energy without consent, which makes you the stalker and the thief." Rick emerged from the house then, his face flushed and jaw clenched. "You think you're so clever," he said, "but this is just your word against ours." "Not really," I replied. "It's my word plus the data logs, the inspection reports, 3 electricians, and now a county compliance officer. So, kind of a landslide." Karen's eyes were darting around now, like she was calculating how much trouble they were actually in. To her credit, she pivoted quickly. "This is all just a misunderstanding," she said, softening her voice into the fake sweet tone she used at association meetings. "We're all neighbors here. No need to escalate things with the county." "Oh, I'm not escalating," I said. "I'm letting gravity do the work." Later that night, I received a text from Amir. They tried to bribe Dugan, offered him a consulting fee to ignore the report. He filed an ethics violation complaint. County's pissed. Perfect. Within a week, the homeowner association had convened a special meeting. Rick was removed from the architectural review committee. Karen was suspended from her post as vice president pending investigation. Their house was placed on mandatory inspection protocol for 6 months, but the best part, their request for a variance to install a real solar system legally this time was denied permanently because of me. And I wasn't finished yet. I installed a new sensor panel in my shed with one very special feature, a directional energy return loop. If anyone tried to tap the line again, the system would redirect the surge straight back down the conduit, trip a high voltage feedback arc, and render any tampering not just pointless but catastrophic. I even installed a hidden camera inside the shed just in case someone got bold enough to try again. Then I sat back, waited and watched. 2 nights later, my alert pinned motion in the shed just past 2 m. I pulled up the feed Rick with a shovel and a headlamp attempting to dig. I didn't stop him. I let him reach the conduit, uncover it, fumble with the spliced line. I watched him squint at the cable, clearly looking for where the previous tap had been. Then I triggered the feedback arc, just a tiny one, enough to throw sparks and blast his shovel out of his hands. He fell backward into the dirt, scrambled up, and ran, not even stopping to grab the tool. The next morning, I emailed the footage to Ernest Dugan and to the association board. That afternoon, Karen's house lost power again, only this time permanently. The city had revoked their grid connection pending a criminal investigation. I didn't need to press charges. I just needed to watch the lights go out one by one. And in the dark silence that followed, I smiled and flipped on my porch light, powered entirely by my own legal, regulated solar system. Because in the end, energy is about balance. And I had all of it. I should have expected Karen wouldn't surrender quietly. Losing her electricity was one thing, losing her influence was another. Within days of the county cutting their grid connection, I noticed flyers attached to every mailbox and tree trunk within a 3-block radius. Save our solar rights, they proclaimed in Comic Sans no less. Below that, a blurry photo of Karen with a forced smile and Rick awkwardly holding a wrench like he'd just remembered how opposable thumbs worked. The flyer claimed they were victims of neighborhood sabotage and government overreach, urging everyone to sign a petition for electrical freedom. It was glorious, absolutely insane but glorious. Most people ignored it. A few of the more gullible retirees asked if I knew anything about the energy dispute, and I just shrugged and said, I generate enough power to keep my house running, my EV charged, and my dog's water bowl warm in the winter. If they can't do the same, maybe they should try not stealing. That usually ended the conversation. But then Karen pivoted to what she does best, weaponizing bureaucracy. She filed a formal complaint with the association accusing me of retaliatory conduct, citing aggressive energy hoarding, and weaponized solar sabotage. Her terminology was so dramatic I half expected her to throw in co-terrorism, just for flair. The board, already tired of her antics, temporarily dismissed it, but not before issuing me a community review notice out of procedural obligation. It meant nothing, but it was her way of saying she wasn't done. So I decided to give her something else to file. I spent the next week rigging up a display on the shed roof that could spell out custom messages using LED arrays. It ran off a small reserve battery and syncs with my phone. The first message, sun's out, scams out. At night it lit up like a beacon of petty justice. By morning, Karen had filed another association grievance for visual light pollution. The board didn't even respond. It wasn't long before Rick tried to get clever again. This time, instead of tapping into my line, he attempted to power their home using a gas-powered generator tucked behind the tool shed. The thing coughed and sputtered so loudly it woke up half the block. It sounded like a lawnmower being tortured. I don't know what make or model it was, but I do know that running it continuously next to a wooden fence while surrounded by dry leaves is basically a firework waiting for the fuse. So I called it in. The fire department rolled up 20 minutes later. Not because I asked them to shut it down, I just happened to mention the smell of fuel and flickering light while on my evening walk. They brought a thermal camera, found dangerously high heat readings, and issued a formal warning. Rick tried to argue, but when your generator's practically belching flame, you lose the moral high ground. At that point, Karen tried to flip the narrative again. She went full martyr mode, started wearing sunglasses and scarves like a disgraced celebrity trying to hide from paparazzi. She posted on the neighborhood app that she was being targeted by an energy extremist, claiming I had a militia-grade solar arsenal. One of her posts included a photo of me mowing my lawn with the caption, "Watching, always watching." The only thing I was watching was grass clippings and the remaining shreds of her credibility. But she wasn't just playing to the neighbors anymore. She'd started reaching higher. I found out through a friend in city planning that she'd sent a letter to the State Public Utilities Commission, claiming I was operating a rogue microgrid that posed a regional blackout threat. She actually wrote that my solar panels could overwhelm the local transformer infrastructure, and that I needed to be monitored by a federal energy agent. That was the moment I realized we were entering a new level of lunacy. So I went one higher. I contacted an investigative journalist I knew from my former industry days. Her name was Lauren, and she owed me a favor for helping her expose a utility company that had been underreporting emissions. I sent her everything: footage of the illegal tap, the data logs, association filings, the footage of Rick digging like a raccoon at 200 a.m., even the thermal readout of the generator incident. She reviewed it, cross-checked the complaints, and pitched it to her editor as suburban sabotage, the dark side of neighborhood solar. They bit. The story dropped online 2 weeks later with a glorious thumbnail: Karen standing next to a Save Our Solar Rights poster looking mid-sentence and slightly cross-eyed. The headline, entitled "Energy: How One Neighborhood Solar System Exposed a Massive Power Theft Scheme." Within hours the story went viral. It wasn't just local anymore. Energy forums picked it up, Reddit got hold of it. Even a minor cable news outlet did a segment titled, "When Neighbors Attack the Grid." The fallout was swift. The county launched a second investigation. The association board was inundated with angry emails demanding Karen be removed permanently. Several neighbors admitted they'd been approached by her in the past to cut corners on property issues, and were now willing to submit statements. Rick tried to deflect by claiming he was missiled by an unlicensed solar installer, but the only footage anyone had was of him holding wire cutters in his own backyard. Still, Karen wouldn't admit defeat. She tripled down and called a neighborhood press conference. Yes, an actual press conference in front of her now partially powerless home. She set up folding chairs, a podium, even a banner that said, "Justice for the energy victims." 4 people showed up. One of them was her niece. 2 left halfway through. And halfway into her speech, the portable microphone she was using started shorting out and emitting static squeals. I wasn't even responsible for that one. That was just the universe throwing in a sympathy sabotage. She screamed into the squealing mic, "He has declared war on us." I leaned against my mailbox and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Only one of us cut a power line with a shovel, Karen." She went red, threw the mic, and stormed back into her house. The association finally held a vote. Karen was officially removed from the board, banned from filing complaints for 1 year, and placed under a property compliance audit that meant every exterior feature of her home had to be reviewed by an independent inspector. Even the color of her front door was deemed under review. Rick, out of either shame or exhaustion, stopped showing his face altogether. Their generator mysteriously disappeared. The backyard hot tub was listed on Facebook Marketplace for half its value, and their house went up for sale not long after. No announcement, just a quiet listing buried in a local agency's website. In the weeks that followed, I removed the LD sign. The message had already been delivered. I started getting quiet nods from neighbors during my walks. A few thanked me outright. One woman brought over homemade muffins and said, "You're the only reason we didn't have to turn this whole place into HOA-topia." But I wasn't done. Not quite. There was still one loose end, a single final gesture to make sure the lesson stuck. 3 weeks after Karen's dramatic exit, her house sat vacant like a sulking monument to ego. The blinds were drawn. The mailbox overflowed with junk mail and expired association threats. A single pumpkin rotted on the porch despite it being late spring. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, victorious. Instead, I felt bored. It was like the final episode of a long-running soap opera had ended, and I didn't know what to do with my evenings anymore. But life didn't stay quiet for long. I first noticed the white pickup truck circling the block. It passed by 3 times in a single afternoon, slow and deliberate, the way an animal tests the perimeter before sneaking into a garden. The 4th time it stopped in front of Karen's house. A guy got out, mid-40s, muscle shirt, clipboard. He unlocked the front door with a key and stepped inside. A realtor. A flipper. A didn't buyer. But I'd seen enough suburban drama to trust my instincts. Something was off. Later that night, I took a walk past the property and noticed the new padlock on the breaker panel. That wasn't a normal security measure, especially not one with a fresh orange extension cord coiled like a viper nearby. Then I saw it, the small inverter unit bolted to the side of the detached garage, partially hidden by a bush. Not grid-tied, not permitted, not standard. Someone had installed a black market solar bypass. Someone was stealing power again. I stood in the street staring at the house I thought I'd exorcised, the house I'd turned into an example, and realized the saga wasn't over. It had respawned. A new parasite had moved in. The next morning I did what I always do: research. County records showed the home had been sold at a private auction to Quick Flip Cash Buyers LLC. The name on the deed was Pay Sun Properties. A little digging revealed it was a shell company owned by a man named Devin Carr, a former electrical contractor whose license had been revoked 3 years earlier for unlicensed work, fraud, and one memorable incident involving a hot tub and an improperly grounded junction box. My kind of guy. I started logging power anomalies again. Sure enough, there was a small but noticeable pull on my system every night between 11:30 p.m. and 4:00 a.m. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to run essentials, maybe lights, a water heater, a refrigerator. Whoever was doing it was smart, careful, but not smarter than me. Instead of reporting it right away, I laid bait. I installed a temporary charging station in my side yard, a sleek, obvious-looking level 2 EV charger hooked up to a decoy sub-panel. But the real panel was rigged with a non-lethal capacitor trap, harmless, but powerful enough to give any curious fingers a wake-up jolt and trigger a hidden camera. 2 nights later, my phone pinned at 2017 motion detected. I opened the feed and watched as a shadowy figure crept up to the charger, hoodie, gloves, a headlamp on low beam. They crouched, pried open the service flap, reached inside, and promptly launched backward as the capacitor popped like a party cracker. The figure scrambled to their feet, cursed loud enough to trip my audio pickup, and stumbled away, leaving the panel swinging open like a kick vending machine. I zoomed in on the camera still. It wasn't Devon, it was Rick. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. So Karen hadn't really left, or at least Rick hadn't. Maybe they'd sold the house to a business partner. Maybe it was all a front. Either way, the power theft had resumed, and now I had fresh evidence. I called Amir again. "You are not going to believe this," I said. He didn't until I showed him the footage. Then he put me on hold for 3 minutes and came back with a plan. "Right, I've got a contact at the State Energy Commission who's been dying to nail these off-grid scammers. If you're willing to cooperate, I'm willing." The plan was elegant. Amir's contact would get the State Energy Authority to run a routine grid integrity survey through the neighborhood. It would give them legal grounds to scan for illegal siphons, substandard inverters, and unauthorized taps. They'd even bring a mobile EMF scanner van to sweep the block for rogue draws. All I had to do was make sure Karen or Rick or Devon, or whoever kept stealing until they got there. So I cranked my decoy system into overdrive. I made it look like I was pulling massive overnight power for something big, maybe a grow house or crypto mining rig, something worth stealing. I even added a subtle hum to my shed at night, like there was a turbine spinning just out of view. Bait layered on bait. Sure enough, the pull from my system increased within 48 hours. Someone was desperate. They were trying to stay hidden. But they were definitely taking the bait. And they made one critical mistake. They started drawing power during the day, which meant they weren't just leeching anymore. They were backfeeding. Backfeeding is when someone takes stolen power, redirects it, and tries to sell it to the grid or to someone else by pretending it came from their own solar source. It's dangerous, stupid, and highly illegal. It can overload transformers, electrocute line workers, and destabilize the local grid. And whoever was doing it was using my system as a power source. The EMF van arrived on a Tuesday afternoon disguised as a landscaping truck. Within 20 minutes, they'd identified irregular magnetic flux centered on the stolen property. By the hour mark, they had thermal imaging from the stolen conduit and a heat signature running directly under the fence. The moment was here. At 3:42 p.m., a team from the State Energy Authority and County Compliance marched up to the property with a warrant and bolt cutters. I watched from my porch as they tore open the breaker panel and immediately found the illegal inverter, a homemade feed relay, and a grotesque tangle of cables that looked like someone had tried to wire a spaceship using parts from a toaster. Devin was there, so was Rick, both detained. Karen, however, was not. That changed 2 hours later. I was sipping tea on the porch when a black SUV came screeching up the street, slammed to a halt, and out came Karen, furious, disheveled, and carrying a purse the size of a Labrador. She stomped up to the agents, shouting about property rights persecution, and of all things, solar gentrification. They ignored her. When one of the officers told her she was on the county's restricted contact list due to prior code violations, she snapped. She marched straight toward me, eyes blazing. "You orchestrated this? Define this," I said. "The legal investigation, the code enforcement, or the karmic collapse of your personal empire?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. That's when Amir's contact stepped in and handed her a citation folder. She flipped through it, her face shifting from red to gray over 60 zalos and in fines, immediate disconnection order, probable cause for criminal charges, and a public ban from holding any neighborhood leadership position for 10 years. Karen sank down onto the porch steps of her own house. Well, not hers anymore. And for the first time in this entire saga, she looked small, defeated, real. The mask had cracked. She wasn't the queen of the cold DSAC anymore. She was just another petty tyrant who'd run out of power. Literally. As the agents loaded boxes of equipment into evidence bags, I looked at the final invoice from Amir's office. You'd think that after being slapped with 60 grand in fines, investigated by multiple government agencies, and publicly shamed on the internet, Karen would finally pack it in, admit defeat, move to a cabin in the woods where there are no solar panels, no haze, and no witnesses. But no, Karen wasn't wired for surrender, she was wired for noise. And even as her world crumbled, she found a way to make one last attempt to rise from the ashes like a shrieking pastel-colored phoenix. It started with a podcast. Yes, a podcast. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a message from a neighbor with the subject line, "You've got to hear this insanity." Attached was a link to a podcast called Civic Shadows, hosted by Karen R. The cover art was a badly photoshopped stock image of the Capitol building covered in lightning bolts. The episode title, Stolen Light, My Battle Against the Green Tyranny. I made it through 8 minutes before laughing so hard I nearly choked on my toast. Karen was spinning a story so deranged it made flat earthers look humble. According to her, she had uncovered a deep state plot involving secret solar energy cartels, corrupt city inspectors, and naturally me, solar baron of Oak Hollow. She claimed I was part of a shadowy sun elite, bent on hoarding power and enslaving communities by manipulating local transformers and spying through smart meters. Rick chimed in around the 12-minute mark to explain how the electromagnetism in solar panels messes with the body's natural aura. He said this while audibly chewing gum and mispronouncing photovoltaic as photo vulture. Devin didn't appear on the show, probably still too busy talking to lawyers. The best part? They'd launched a donation campaign to fund a legal counterattack. "We will sue the county, the state, and Big Sun," Karen declared dramatically, as if the star at the center of our solar system was a named defendant. By the end of the episode, I had a plan. I downloaded the podcast, transcribed it, highlighted every knowingly false claim and every potential incitement to vandalism. Then I contacted a friend who worked in digital defamation law and asked what would happen if I filed a cease and desist under my actual name. He laughed. "They're done the second you file. But do you really want to kill it that fast?" He was right, I didn't. So I filed anonymously through a third-party intermediary. That way they get the scare without knowing where it came from. The goal wasn't silence, was panic. I wanted her tripping over herself trying to figure out which bridge she just burned. And it worked. The next episode of Civic Shadows opened with Karen sounding breathless and paranoid, announcing that they were trying to silence the truth. She blamed hackers. Then she blamed China. Then she blamed a secret society of solar engineers she called the Photons. No, really, the Photons. At this point, the podcast was so insane that Reddit latched on. Someone posted a compilation of her wildest quotes to Arcune casualties with the title, "My HOA VP thinks the sun is a weapon." It went viral overnight. People began stitching her podcast audio into parody videos. Karen's voiceover scenes from The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, even a clip of Gordon Ramsay yelling at raw chicken. But then something unexpected happened. An actual local news outlet picked up the story again. Not the energy scandal, everyone knew about that. This time they focused on the podcast and how the former HOA vice president of Oak Hollow had gone full conspiracy theorist. They interviewed neighbors, some of whom talked anonymously about how Karen used to inspect their trash cans and send formal complaints about grass being too aggressively green. And then came the part that floored me. They asked me to comment on camera. I considered saying no. Staying quiet had been my weapon all along. Karen shouted, "I calculated. Rick postured. I documented. But something about that final interview offer felt right, like the coda to a long symphony. So I agreed. They set up a simple shoot in my backyard with my solar shed humming softly behind me. The interviewer asked calm, measured questions. What started the conflict? How did I respond? What did I hope would come of it? I kept it short, honest. I didn't gloat. I didn't insult. I just told the story as it happened. How I noticed something was wrong, investigated it, and slowly watched as a simple case of theft turned into a suburban Greek tragedy. I wasn't trying to be a hero, I said. I just didn't want someone stealing my sunlight. When the interview aired, something changed. Neighbors who had stayed quiet started waving when I walked by. One of them, Mr. Thompson, who hadn't spoken to anyone in years except through hand-scrawled notes left in mailboxes, came out to shake my hand. A teenager who lived 3 houses down asked if I could help her design a small solar setup for a school project. Even the show president, who had previously avoided eye contact like I was radioactive, came by to offer, "Thanks for your patience with all of that madness." It was surreal. And Curran, the podcast disappeared, just vanished, no explanation, no final episode. The website domain expired, the donation links went dead. I don't know if it was legal pressure, embarrassment, or just the crushing weight of public ridicule. But one day it was noise, and the next it was silence. Still, I wasn't quite ready to trust that silence, so I made one last modification to the shed. I installed a self-contained off-grid detection array with lev monitoring of every outgoing and incoming amp, complete with tamper detection and backup cellular alert. It was the Fort Knox of solar data. If a squirrel sneezed near my conduit, I'd know about it, and then I waited. Weeks passed, then a month. No anomalies, no taps, no creeping voltage loss. Karen's old house was still on the market, but the listing was quiet, marked under repair. I saw a few workers repainting the porch. A real contractor this time, not Rick.